Welcome to all of you for this important timely webinar on Iran, the people versus dictatorship for peace and popular sovereignty. This meeting follows closely on the back of several months of popular unrest in Iran following the killing in September last year of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Amini in the custody of the so-called Guidance Patrol or Morality Police, having been taken in on account of her allegedly improper wearing of the mandatory hijab. The backlash initially against the mandatory hijab and the continued presence on Iran's streets of the Morality Police soon morphed into calls for the end of clerical rule and dictatorship and a popular uprising with the country's women and girls at the very forefront. At least 600 people are believed to have been killed during the unrest, with tens of thousands more injured, maimed, or arrested and taken into detention by the Islamic Republic regime's security forces and militia. Torture, sexual violence, and forced disappearances committed by the regime have also been widely reported, and several people have been put to death since December for their alleged roles in the protests, with reports even in recent days that others have been moved into solitary confinement in preparation for their imminent execution, despite international calls on the Islamic Republic regime to exercise restraint. Iran has the highest rate of execution in proportion to its population in the world. The regime is believed to have executed at least 582 people in total last year, a 75% increase on the previous year, according to human rights groups, who say the rise is to instill fear among the anti-regime protesters. Since the beginning of 2023 alone, it is believed that at least 200 people have been executed, and there are growing concerns about the horrendous human rights situation in the country. With a relative quietening of the street protests over the last few weeks, it is feared that the authorities in Iran are currently embarking on a counter-offensive designed to shore up the dictatorship and forcibly return the country to its pre-protest status quo. And it is against this backdrop that tonight's speakers will be speaking on Iran at the current crossroads. We hope that you enjoyed tonight's event, organised and hosted by Liberation and its long-time affiliate, the Committee for the Defence of the Iranian People's Rights, Tudeh. And please take this valuable opportunity to put any questions you have to the speakers. Please send your question in a message in the Q&A tab. Please identify who your question will be addressed to, if not a general question to be put to the panel. Take this valuable opportunity, and our sincere apologies again for the severe technical mishap which has caused the delay to this meeting. Our first speaker this evening is Professor Ervand Abrahamian. Professor Abrahamian is a distinguished professor of history at Baruch College and the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, and is widely regarded as one of the leading academic authorities on the history and politics of modern Iran. Born in Tehran, Iran in 1940 to Armenian Iranian parents, Professor Abrahamian went on to study at Oxford University in England and then Columbia University in the US. His PhD, awarded in 1969, was titled Social Basis of Iranian Politics, the Tudeh Party 1941 to 1953. Professor Abrahamian is the author of several major works, including Iran Between Two Revolutions, 1982, Tortured Confessions, Prisons and Public Recantations in Modern Iran, 1999, and A History of Modern Iran, 2000, revised 2018. He's also regarded as an authority on the period leading up to and including the CIA MI6-backed military coup against the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh, in August 1953. He has authored two books on this important episode in the contemporary history and politics of Iran: The Coup, 1953, the CIA, and the Roots of Modern US-Iranian Relations, 2013, and Oil Crisis in Iran, From Nationalism to Coup d'etat, published in 2021. Thank you very much, and without much further ado, I'll hand over to Professor Abrahamian.
The recent widespread protests have, not surprisingly, raised the expectation that Iran is actually entering a revolution. This question has become very prevalent, especially in the West. My answer is actually Iran is not in a revolutionary stage at the moment. I give two major reasons for this. One obvious one is that if you look at historically, revolutions are actually quite rare. The term is often thrown around for protests, revolts, regime abdications. But when you actually try to find real revolutions, they're on a handful. The Iranian Revolution is one of the few of those handful revolutions. Thomas Carlyle, writing about the French Revolution, said that, in fact, such an event occurs once in a millennium. He may have been exaggerating somewhat, but if on the whole, if you look at since 1789, there are really only a handful of events that you can call genuine revolutions, and 1979 is one of those. Second reason I would argue that there is not a revolution in Iran yet is that even though the regime started in 1979 with a great deal of legitimacy and popularity, in some of the referendums early years, some 85% of the population, actually electorate, voted in support of the regime. This popularity is drastically diminished over the years. I won't go into all the reasons why it has eroded its own legitimacy, but I would argue that at present it probably has only a 15 to 20% of popular support. It has alienated much of the support that it had originally enjoyed in 1979. Now, even though I would say it has lost a great deal of this support, it still retains support among those groups that actually gained substantially during the revolution, especially in property transfers from the old ruling class to the more middle class that supported the revolution. So the people connected to the regime in the Bazaar, the Revolutionary Guards, these are, I would say, supporters still of the regime. And consequently, the regime, although it's faced by a great deal of protests, the regime has not suffered a crisis yet. The protests have been contained, and as a whole, the ruling elite has managed to hold itself together. There have been a few members of the former elite that have expressed discontent, but the core of the regime has remained intact. So even though one argued that a revolution is not imminent, what one can also stress, and I think this is the real interesting issue now, is that the regime is facing a major crisis, a permanent crisis. And it's a crisis it cannot solve. The reason for this is that there is a real disconnect, conflict, clash of discourses. The regime itself talks in the language of divine rights, divine authority, divine legitimacy. It claims to represent God on earth, and anyone who opposes it is basically challenging God's will. But when you look at the protests, interestingly enough, religion is completely missing in the protests. The people protesting are not interested in religion. The language they're using is really the language at heart of the French Revolution, the radical Enlightenment. They're talking about liberty, equality, choice, individual rights, the right to protest, the right to speak, the right to dress as you want, the right to organize, especially trade unions. These are seen among the protesters as intricate human rights that are not given to them by God or representatives of God, but they are rights by nature given to that human beings have. So what you're seeing basically is a clash of discourses. And this is not something that the regime can overcome. It's not even willing to even consider moderating its own claims and trying to meet the protesters. And the protesters themselves are, in fact, just completely oblivious to the notion of divine religious rights. They are talking much more about a secular society where people who want to have religion find it's for their personal, private, their concern, but it's not a concern of the state to enforce on people their religious beliefs. So consequently, I think one can see a basic, I would say, a fundamental contradiction between the language, between the arguments, the claims of the authorities, and the language, the protests of the public. And interestingly enough, the main people leading these protests are the young. These are people who went to Islamic kindergarten, Islamic primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, even universities. They, for reasons I don't have time to go into, have actually resorted and returned to the language of the Enlightenment, which had been important in Iran early in the 20th century during the Constitutional Revolution. And this language of the Enlightenment had been submerged and also overwhelmed by the language of Islam, of Gharbzadegi, of the denunciation of anything from the West in the 1960s and 70s. But for surprising, and I would say for shocking reasons for the regime, the generation that has grown up under the regime has returned back to the ideas of the Enlightenment. And this has basically created a fundamental crisis for the regime that it cannot overcome. It may survive the opposition, but it does not know how to handle basically this discourse of the opposition. So I would conclude that actually Eric Hobsbawm is probably having a good laugh, hearing that the echoes of the French Revolution are resonating well in some 230 years after 1789 in Iran at the present time. So I would conclude by saying that the revolution is not imminent, but the regime is basically faced by an unsurmountable crisis of how to deal with a widespread opposition. And the revolution may come eventually and will come eventually, but it's not imminent. So I'll end there. Thank you.
Professor Abrahamian, thank you very much for that that address. Insightful and very interesting as always. And I would encourage all attendees to look up Professor Abrahamian's works on the modern politics and history of Iran, all of which are widely available and very informative about the situation in the country. I now move on if we are ready, if Jeremy Corbyn is present. Jeremy Corbyn, MP, who of course needs little introduction. He's the MP for Islington North and is the joint president of Liberation and a long-time campaigner on issues relating to Iran. And we're very glad to have him here today. I will just double check to make sure he is here. Okay, I have just received a message from the administrators that he is not yet here. So in which case I will then move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Azar Sepehr, a representative of the Democratic Organisation of Iranian Women. Dr. Azar Sepehr is a spokesperson for the Democratic Organisation of Iranian Women, Iran's largest and most well-established progressive women's organisation, still in existence, and viewed well by much of civil society there. Originally founded in 1943, simply as the Organisation of Iranian Women, Against the backdrop of a fiercely conservative and male-dominated political scene and society, the organisation went on to join the Women's International Democratic Federation, WIDF, in 1947. Chiefly concerned with pushing for radical changes in the laws governing the rights and standing of women in the family and workplace, the organisation was banned repeatedly before being suppressed in the Islamic Republic's purging of the country's left in the early 1980s. I will therefore hand over to Azar Sepehr. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. I apologize for I have a technical difficulty with my video as well, so I've turned it off at the moment. I will read from a text in order to take not too much time and remain within the time allotted to me. The working class organizations and trade unions have just celebrated International Workers' Day at a time when ordinary rights and freedoms are being attacked by capitalism's drive to accumulate more wealth for the few in power, assisted by the neoliberal agenda dominating state policies in most countries across the world. In Iran, these struggles have been compounded by reactionary political Islam that set its agenda as a socially backward system of medieval rules, with one individual acting as the supreme leader and jurist. Curtailing women's rights in all spheres is the defining feature of the Islamic Republic and its political Islam ideology. The Islamic Republic's linchpin policy was the law of retribution, which deems a woman's worth to be half a man. The introduction of this law has had destructive consequences and has impacted women in the home, in the social arena, in education, the judiciary, and in political life. The most precise way of describing the regime's stance towards women is misogynistic, with all the aggression and violence that it implies. The Islamic Republic's achievements have included taking away the right of custody of children in case of divorce, making it a legal requirement for women to have the permission of a male guardian before they can travel, a woman's witness statement being counted as half a man's in the court of law, with clear repercussions for a female victim seeking justice against the male aggressor. A woman's entitlement being half that of the man in case of inheritance, legalizing child marriage at the age of 9 for girls, subsequently raised to 13 years, with its horrendous consequences for the child victim. And of course, the mandatory hijab. The segregation of women and men in education and in health has further disadvantaged women and curtailed their access to services. The Islamic Republic treats women as an appendage to men. In November 2021, the Guardian Council passed the Youthful Population and Protection of Family Law, severely restricting access to contraceptives and abortion, the latter being punishable as a serious offense. It was against this backdrop that the nationwide protests of woman life freedom began in September, following the killing of Mahsa Amini in the custody of the Guidance Patrol. The regime's brutal response to the protesters, led mainly by women and supported by students, turned the protests into a widespread uprising, drawing support from all strata of the society, calling for an end to the mandatory hijab and soon encompassing demands for social and political change. Tens of thousands of people were arrested during the protests, including school children who took part in the demonstrations. Between 500 to 600 have been reported killed. An unknown number have been injured and maimed by the regime's security forces and plainclothes thugs, or in prisons and under torture. In the aftermath of the uprising, the Islamic Republic is using new strategies to re-establish order. Multitude surveillance cameras have been installed at massive cost to identify, fine, and punish women who do not wear the headscarf or have so-called bad hijab. The oppressive Sharia practice of enjoining good and forbidding the bad which consists of vigilantism by believers, has meant that the regime has outsourced its suppression of women to reactionary zealots in the society. The Supreme Leader's pronouncements to this effect have become fire at will directives when confronting women who do not wear the headscarf. Despite their continued persecution, the women of Iran are continuing their acts of civil disobedience by refusing to wear the hijab wherever they can. The streets, the metro, universities, and grocery stores continue to be scenes of struggle. Women challenge the men or women who try to make them wear the hijab. In response, the regime shuts down businesses that choose to serve women without hijab. Female students who try to enter their university without the hijab, without the scarf, are refused entry. The commander of the armed forces, Ahmad Reza Radan, announced in April that anyone who removes their scarf in public, in their car, or in places of business will be brought before the courts. The regime's anger at women and girls' prominent role in the uprising has led to heinous acts against them. Continued chemical attacks on girls' schools and some female students' dormitories are aimed at punishing and terrorizing the people of Iran and discouraging parents from sending their daughters to school. More than 1,200 children are reported to have been affected by poisoned gas attacks, for which the state is ultimately responsible. The response to concerned parents is abuse and beatings. No attempt has been made at identifying the perpetrators of the poisonings. The prisons have been another scene of struggle, where reports of torture and rape is commonplace. In December 2022, when the protests were at their peak, Narges Mohammadi issued a statement from prison highlighting several cases of rape to draw attention to how the regime uses sexual assault and violence as a means of terrorizing women and men and their families. One of the cases she referred to was of a new cellmate who was kidnapped from the street without any involvement in demonstrations and who had been sexually assaulted in the car while being transported to prison. The prisoners staged sit-ins in protest. 4 days later, the young prisoner was forcibly transferred to the remote Kershak prison. Women, alongside men, have joined protests at the working and living conditions, as well as at the dictatorship and corruption of the state. They have done so as nurses, teachers, workers, university students, lawyers, journalists, artists, actors, and athletes. With its own shock and awe tactic, the regime has restarted chain executions across Iran. In early April, 2 men were executed on the charge of insulting the Prophet. One was the father of 3 young children, and the other was a cabinet maker and sole carer of her elderly mother. They had been part of a group of 7 men and women who were arrested for hosting a Telegram channel named Critique of Religion and Superstition. In a recent statement, a group of 16 women activists point out that in 12 days since mid-April, the regime has executed 64 people in different parts of the country charged with different crimes. These include an odd mix of disrespecting the religion, political activity, or drug charges. In Kurdistan and Sistan and Baluchistan provinces, in protests and strikes by workers, teachers, retirees, students, and even in political prisons, the people of Iran are calling for an end to dictatorship and for democracy, freedom, and social justice. We, the Democratic Organization of Iranian Women, unequivocally support and reiterate those demands and repeat our call for the immediate and unconditional freedom of all political prisoners and for an end to the regime's summary trials and executions. Thank you.
Dr. Azar Sepehr, thank you very much for that address. I would like to firstly apologise sincerely for the opening of the meeting. I know that there have been a couple of observations about the pace at which I was talking, and we had unforeseen circumstances whereby Christine Blower, Baroness Blower, who was due to chair the meeting right up to the end. There was a severe technical problem which prevented her from doing so, and therefore I was asked at the last minute, 10 minutes already having passed the start time of the meeting. So I sincerely apologise to anyone who had difficulty following my opening of the meeting. I will now move on to our third speaker. And this is Mr. Kemal Ozkan, who is the Assistant General Secretary of IndustriALL. IndustriALL is a global union based in Geneva, Switzerland. IndustriALL has worked closely with its affiliate, the prominent Union of Metal Workers and Mechanics of Iran, the UMMI, on the fraught labour situation inside Iran. Born in Adapazarı, Turkey in 1969 to a working class, politically active family, Mr. Ozkan came of age in the era following the 1980 military coup d'etat in that country, during which his father was a political prisoner, an experience that profoundly has shaped his outlook. Mr. Ozkan was elected to his position at IndustriALL's founding Congress in 2012, re-elected in 2016 and 2021. With the merger of three major global unions covering the metal, chemical, energy, mine, textile and garment sectors. He ran for the position of ITUC General Secretary in 2022. I hand over to Mr. Kemal Ozkan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chair, my dear comrades, sisters and brothers. Thank you very much for this great opportunity. Indeed, for the national role, giving unwavering support to all the unions, working class throughout the world for democracy and self-determination, and mobilize our forces to support workers and unions in their fight against dictatorship, against autocracy. This is an important area because the world is burning. The world is burning, I can tell you, and everywhere in the world we have a huge problem of peace, huge problem of coups, military coups, huge problem of dictators, and a huge attack against democracy, democratic institutions, democratic rules, and the fundamental rights. And for sure, Iran is one of the countries where we have constant solidarity with the working class in the country. And Professor Abrahamian was referring to a crisis for the regime. Indeed, I cannot say there is a revolution, but I can tell you that there is a huge continuous uprisal, mobilization, standing up the working class in the country. I think this is quite important because the regime has lost its legitimacy, because it is even unable to provide the basic needs of the people of Iran. So this is why in workplaces, in different the areas of the economy, every day we receive mobilization, wildcat strikes of the working class in Iran. And I believe, I can tell you this, that and the change will certainly come from the mobilization and the struggle of the working class in the country. And enlightenment is important, the word. And we know that so there is no basic democratic political infrastructure in the country. There is no guarantee of basic human rights. There is no separation of powers. And this Vilayet-i Faqih system, putting the religion in front of any elected power, and makes the whole infrastructure for democracy absent. But in the meantime, we have a huge problem throughout the country with freedom of assembly and right to participate, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of mass media, and persecution of human rights defenders, civil society activists. And we don't see any liberty for different segments of religion, for Baha'is, for Sunnis, and there is no freedom for ethnics like Kurds. And I can tell you that there is huge oppression over minorities, refugees, migrants, and Ms. Azar already mentioned the women mobilization out there. And I can tell you that the country is burning. The country is burning. And trade unions are the main establishments for a democratic society. But I can tell you that the regime refuses to recognize the unions, particularly independent unions. They don't recognize the right to strike and protest. And even on matters as basic as claiming unpaid wages, and its default response is intimidation, violence, and repression. And this suppression of trade union activity begins with the non-recognition of the real, genuine, democratic trade unions. And I can give you a couple of prototypes in violation of workers' rights. And security services attack workers' rallies, the intimidation of labor activists and the protesting workers, and arbitrary and summary dismissals, and the arrest of trade union activists and persecution under the charges such as disrupting the public order, propaganda against the state, acting against the national security, which can carry severe sentences, including capital punishment, and physical and psychological torture during the detention, including publicly broadcasting forced confessions, imprisonment under arbitrary and indeterminate sentences in horrendous conditions and without access to medical care, and preventing the free circulation of news about unions' activities, and sabotaging bona fide trade unions by setting up parallel regime-backed bodies. And let's remember November 2019, and the protests started after the government tripled the fuel price overnight. What began as an economic protest soon turned into a broader series of protests against the government corruption and mismanagement. The response from the government was very brutal, shooting and beating protesters, and 250, 300 people were killed, around 4,000 people injured, and at least 7,000 protesters were arrested at that time. But I can tell you that over the last 5-6 years, we observe this kind of attack against working class in the country. And this is not acceptable. This does not fit to the requirements of 21st century. And I can tell you a recent example, the ongoing struggle of Iranian teachers and education workers who have been a constant presence on the streets and academic campuses of the country. Not only were they one of the prominent trade unions that supported the recent Women Life Freedom protest movement, they have continued their gatherings and vigils despite constant harassment and the huge pressures from the regime. But they don't give up. And it was just last February, they issued a 12-point charter as a coalition of independent trade unions, civil society organizations inside the country, and they put forward their demands. Now they are outspoken. And this major development has been warmly welcomed by progressive currents inside Iran and publicly endorsed by former Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition. I think this mobilization is now coming to a format with the support of large part of the society. And again, let me repeat myself that the mobilization of the working class is really forming an important ground for the whole country, for development of the society. And I can report to you that in the sectors that my organization covers, oil and gas sector, it is mining industry, it is automotive industry, I can tell you all the time there are mobilizations and people want much more salaries. They want to work in human working conditions. And look at just 2018. I mean, one of the main reasons why they went on strike as wildcat, because they were working in temperatures more than 50 centigrade degrees with inadequate facilities. And this is inhuman. Even the very basic the working conditions are there. And then it was repeated in 2020. It was repeated in 2021. And now I can tell you that at the moment, there are still the ongoing strikes in oil and gas, in the oil and gas projects in southern Iran. And people are demanding wage increases. And they are mobilizing everyone. And I can tell you that the latest news I am provided is that regime officials are progressing the sacking 4,000 or 5,000 strikers. And yesterday, 8 leading activists supporting the action in South the Pars oil and gas fields were arrested. And my affiliate, Metal and Mechanics Union called UMME, has issued a statement calling for their freedom. The workers were just on the call for justice and their legitimate rights, like in any other country. They have acted within the spirit of constitution and the fundamental rights recognized by international norms and standards. I saw this picture several times, for example, in Kodra auto factory in Tabriz over non-payment of wages. And I have seen that picture in iron ore mine in Chadar Malo, and 300 workers were sacked by just over their strike. Now, this comes to a point, enough is enough. Enough is enough. This is why now there is a huge mobilization in Iran. And it is our the main responsibility to keep worldwide attention to the violations of fundamental workers' rights in Iran through an international campaign, through disclosing all the information we receive from the country. From that point of view, Iran deserves much better than what it has today. I personally have quite the experience with the country. This country has a huge history, has a huge culture. Even ordinary people has a huge accumulated knowledge, experience on culture, on science. From that point of view, I am certain, I am sure that the country itself will regenerate the society. I believe there is such infrastructure because people want to have their own future in their hands. Our main role as the international...
Dear Kemal, sorry, just to let you know, would you, as interesting as your...
Finalizing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and our main job, main responsibility is to be shoulder to shoulder with our Iranian sisters and brothers. And this is our mission. This is our main job at the moment. And I believe we all need to join our forces in supporting Iranian people and Iranian working class. Thank you very much again. Over back to you, Comrade Chaya.
Thank you very much, Kemal, for that fascinating insight on the labour rights situation inside Iran. I'm sure that many of those in attendance this evening would agree that the trade unionists who are at the forefront of the struggle against very difficult conditions inside Iran, that they're an inspiration to all those who are interested in progressive change in Iran and hope for a better future there. So thank you very much for your address. I now move without further ado to Jeremy Corbyn MP. He needs little introduction. Jeremy Corbyn is the former leader of the Labour Party. He's the MP for Islington North and has been since the general election of 1983. And he is also the joint president of Liberation and a long-time campaigner on issues relating to the human rights situation inside Iran. So thank you very much for joining us, Jeremy, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be on this call, and well done, Liberation, for organizing it. And it's been a pleasure listening to the other speakers, albeit with a few technical difficulties here and there, but we get past all those. We're, after all, resourceful people of the left, so we can do it. I want to say thank you to Kemal for what he just said, because the voice of workers in Iran is seldom heard outside Iran. And I do think our international trade union movement needs to do far more to support trade union organization and trade union activism in Iran, because they are the ones that have taken and are taking strike action and are doing their very best to support those people that are defending wages and conditions, but also striking for better wages. And indeed, I've raised a number of times in Parliament the issue of Iranian trade unionists that continue to be in prison in Iran, and I think we have to do that. So one thing that I hope can come out of tonight's meeting is obviously solidarity with the generality of human rights issues in Iran, but specifically trade union comrades and those in the women's movement who are in prison at the moment and facing such enormous threats. I think it's also important to recall the role that Britain has played in Iran's history, the way in which Britain treated Iran as a colony for a very long time, in a way in which BP gained its initial wealth from the oil of Iran, or Persia as it was then known, and indeed the role that Britain played in 1952 with the support for the coup against the Mossadegh government and the installation of the Shah and his regime in Iran. And so I think that Britain's role in the history of Iran means that there is a unique importance in solidarity in this country with the people of Iran who are dealing with human rights abuses, which are a result of a whole complex series of historical events. The issue that Professor Baruch was talking about at the beginning about the revolutions. Yes, the revolution, in a sense, the coup of 1952, and then the revolution of 1979, which ushered in the Islamic Republic and the reign of terror that happened for quite a long time after that, and the current regime and its opposition to the rights of people in Iran has to be reckoned with and understood. But it's also important to recognize the role of the huge exiled Iranian community in Western Europe, particularly Britain and Germany, but also in the United States, and the role that they can and do play in standing up for human rights and for peace in Iran. The current issues that we're faced with are systematic and abominable abuses of human rights, particularly of women campaigners who are defending the right for women to dress as they wish, defending the right of women to work and to make their contribution to society, and their right to protest, and particularly that of young people to defend that right to protest. And that we have to say and do much more about. And also recognize that there is class opposition to what is happening in Iran. Whilst it's seen as a generality of society, it's the working class communities that suffer the most, and it's the women in those communities that suffer the most. There is also the issue of ethnic and linguistic diversity in Iran, where the attacks on Kurdish people and so many other Baluchi groups and others is systematic by the regime, and has resulted again in many being put in prison, and indeed some being executed as a result of it. And I've heard many speeches in the British Parliament on this issue, and the question of the sanctions that have been imposed on Iran for alleged breaches of the nuclear deal. I do not believe that Iran's liberation will come about by outside intervention or by sanctions imposed necessarily by Western European or the United States, but will come about from the people of Iran themselves and the solidarity that social movements around the world can mount towards the people of Iran. And I am also concerned that the bombing that occasionally takes place in Iran by outside forces is extremely dangerous and can only escalate the situation, and indeed put the idea of a military solution to the issue further to the fore. And so my message in this meeting is that the Iranian people have suffered enormously at the hands of this regime, of a structural program which discriminates against the poor, the working class, and anyone that wants to speak out for the kind of class politics that many of us on this call have spent our lives fighting within. That hope was dashed away in 1979 when there was a massive working class movement which helped to end the Shah's regime. But that trade union solidarity, that women's solidarity, that young person's solidarity is absolutely still there. And that's why we have to express our solidarity with our demonstrations, with the practical support and help that we can give, but also encouraging other countries to adopt the same policy. But I do not believe that the idea of a war with Iran will bring about any peace. It will merely kill very many more people and will be used as a pretext for gaining access to the huge natural resources that Iran has at its disposal. This has got to be what we've always done in liberation: express solidarity with those that are opposing their own oppression, opposing the discrimination that's meted out against them, and trying to bring about political change because of that. That's why we're having this meeting tonight, and that's why liberation exists as an organization. And I think the contributions made by the other speakers have been really excellent and helped us to analyze this situation very well and give greater currency to the arguments for solidarity with the people of Iran, with the women of Iran, with the young people of Iran, with the trade unions of Iran. They're the people that will bring about real justice, real peace, and real hope for the people of Iran. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. That was a fantastic address, and as always, measured and progressive, reflecting our take here at Liberation. So we thank you very much for speaking to us this evening and taking time out of your very busy schedule to do so. I would like to remind all of the attendees on this call this evening that this is also a valuable opportunity for them to put any question that they have to our speakers here this evening. Please don't be shy. Take up the opportunity to speak to our wonderful panel. You can do so by putting your question in the Q&A tab. at the bottom of your screen. And we will endeavour to have any question that you have answered in the Q&A session that will follow the fifth speaker's address. So please don't hold back. Any query or question that you have, let us know. I now move on, last but not least, to our fifth speaker, Comrade Habib of the International Department of the Tudeh Party of Iran. Comrade Habib is a spokesperson for the International Department of the Tudeh Party of Iran. The Tudeh, which translates as masses in Farsi, a party, was founded in October 1941 as the successor organization to the original Communist Party of Iran, which had been banned by Reza Shah's authorities. The Tudeh Party of Iran is therefore the oldest Iranian political party still in existence today. Particularly from its inception, right until the CIA MI6-backed coup d'etat in 1953, the party was a major force in Iran and a key driver in the campaign for the nationalization of the oil industry. The Tudeh Party was a major participant in the subsequent 1979 revolution. Throughout its history, it has suffered suppression at the hands of the various authorities and governments that inside Iran. Shortly after the revolution, it was then banned and bloodily suppressed by the nascent Islamic Republic regime, aided by the CIA and MI6, exactly 40 years ago today. In May 1983, the party was subjected to an attack. The party retains a solid support base among Iran's working class, trade unions and student groups, and we're delighted to be able to hear from Comrade Habib today. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much, first of all, Liberation, for organizing this meeting, rightly titled The People versus Dictatorship. So that is established that there is a dictatorship in Iran. And as Kemal properly mentioned, this is a fight that's going on all across the world, actually, with different characteristics in different countries. Before I begin going into my main discussions, it's sort of a nice tradition we have in Iran. We always remember the people who were victims of all these struggles and the fallen and everybody else that put their lives and lives actually in this. So we really respect everybody that has contributed to this struggle over the years and years and decades, especially in Iran. We are at a point that now we are like it's 40 some years after the revolution 1979, which Professor Abrahamian fairly described it as a revolution, a very popular revolution. Unfortunately, none of the demands and demands of the people were met over the course of these 44 years, 45 years almost. What I'm trying to do, because everybody basically covered most of the bases, I'm going to look at it from a different angle, from a different perspective, from a point of view of a leftist communist party actually working for the demands and the interests of working people. I go back to a little basic first, just to set up some grounds, and then I continue from there. The power structure in Iran is we call it a theocratic capitalist. It's not only theocratic, it's also capitalist. So it's the most barbaric, the most, the ugliest version of capitalist regime that can be. And we call it a regime and not a government because it has a multi-layered power structure in it. If time permits, then we can go over the power structure in Iran. Government is only one part of it. The main tier, power tier is supreme leader and everything around it. So it's basically a two-tier system in Iran. But this is in the surface, and the base is also capitalist. That's why the crisis in Iran that Professor Baruch mentioned is multifaceted. It's not only on the surface, it's not only on culture, it's not only on religious matters, it's not only on freedoms and democratic rights, it's also economic, because it's a capitalist theocratic regime. So what people really want under this regime, unfortunately, because none of the things that they were hoping that we get after the revolution was materialized, It's basically they want their dignity back, they want justice, and they want freedom. That's why, you know, the slogan "Women, Life, Freedom" basically covers all of these bases. They want their dignity, they want the democratic rights, democratic freedoms. They want justice, they want a better life. They want social justice. They want, as you know, Kemal was mentioning what's going on in the working people sector in Iran, and they want freedom. So this struggle is going on in various streams, actually, various aspects of the struggle are going on at the same time. It's not only the hijab, it's not only university separation, gender discrimination. It is all of those. It is also economical demands that people have. And all of this is happening when there are no official free opposition operating in Iran. You know, the chair of the meeting described, you know, what happened to the Party of Iran, which is 82 years old party in Iran. What happened to it 40 years ago? And this is the party that supported the revolution, did everything that they could to forward the revolution towards the goals that were mentioned. Now, we are facing these days, in the past 8 months, with this huge uprising, which didn't come out of nowhere. This was an uprising that was basically accumulated over the years, especially in the past 5-6 years, as Kemal mentioned. There was several labor strikes. There were several uprisings, including the ones in 2018, 2019. Many people were killed, and most of these recent ones, they had economical demands. They were not only about hijab or freedoms and democratic rights, basically. But it had economical demands. So the country is in economic crisis. I believe it was Professor Abrahamian that mentioned that these crises, unfortunately, the regime cannot solve them. So they resort to other means, actually, to harness the uprising. And why do they do that? Because they want to keep this, maintain this structure, this nexus of political power, economical power, and the suppression apparatus that they have. These three pillars of this regime actually working together, because this is what keeps this regime alive. And the social basis of this regime, if you can call it that way, is among these three pillars. It's the people they hire in security apparatus and suppression apparatus, the bourgeoisie that it has different layers, mostly rentier bourgeoisie, people who sack the wealth of the country. There's bureaucratic bourgeoisie, there's military bourgeoisie, which is basically the face of it is revolutionary guards. It's a huge, huge capitalist enterprise in Iran, the revolutionary guard. So all of these are working together, actually, so that the regime stays in power and continue internally. This is everything that I mentioned so far. It was just internally. So what happened internally in terms of gender discrimination, how they treat the women, how they treat the political freedoms, democratic rights, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and everything else. And on top of that, there's economic hardship. The reason being that the way that we see it is following the neoliberal economic policies over the last 40 years, I would say, and especially after the war ended in 1988. The neoliberal policies, privatization, selling the government assets basically to private hands. And these private hands mostly are the regime-affiliated people or organization. One of the things that may actually you find interesting is that a lot of entrepreneurs that are not affiliated with the regime, even those guys are leaving the country. It's not only nurses, it's not only engineers, lawyers, doctors, all kind of people, computer scientists and everything else. even entrepreneurs that they really want to stay there. They want to work there, and they have done some really fantastic jobs in Iran. We have to acknowledge that. But they're under tremendous pressure from the regime to stay within the framework of the regime, to support the regime, to pay their dues to the regime. They don't want to do that. They leave. A lot of them leave. A lot of those even knowledge-based companies, they are leaving the country. So these privatization policies, elimination of subsidies, that was another thing, which actually directly impacts the life of the ordinary people, working people. Corruption, rentiering, there's tons of news about that. And environmental issues, that's another thing. Brain drain, I mentioned about that. And then on top of that, there's adventurous foreign policies of the regime, meddling in the area, in the region. You mentioned Kemal, I believe, a couple of them, but they feed, either they finance a lot of these affiliates in the region, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Africa, even actually. And unfortunately, they escalate tensions from time to time. A lot of things, they have been destructive, especially in Palestine, for example. They raised Hamas, they raised Islamic Jihad. These are the things that they actually are damaging the cause of the Palestine in that area. But whenever necessary, they are open to working with the imperialist powers, and they have done that in the past whenever it was needed in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They helped them. They helped them to get. They are not. This is something that we hear from a lot of people, that the Iranian regime is anti-imperialist regime. They are not. They may be anti-American, like for example Taliban, but they're not anti-imperialist. They are, as I mentioned, this regime is a capitalist regime. Fully capitalist. They want to actually intertwine with the global capitalist system under the neoliberal regime, and that's what they have been doing so far. That's why IMF praised them for that. And having said that, the last thing that is happening to Iran is the sanctions. Mr. Corbyn mentioned this is something that has broken the back of the people, and the regime, somehow. Has gained actually from this, has benefited from this. And a lot of them, they made tons and tons of money when they're just, going around the sanctions. But in the meantime, the people are suffering hugely. I don't go into detail of what is happening right now in Iran. Everybody actually mentioned what is going on. But the main thing is that...
Dear Comrade Habib, sorry, would you be able to round your address to a close?
Yeah. Just give me 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So what is happening here, I just want to mention that what is happening in Iran right now, it's not a reformist movement anymore. People have gone beyond the regime. They want more than that. They want a fundamental change in Iran, which is very difficult to make it happen, because the opposition, proper opposition, doesn't exist in Iran. All the opposition parties have been crushed. So basically, all the people are doing, a lot of this is spontaneous. They try, but with organizing the opposition is one of the biggest hurdles and obstacles in Iran. And to end my discussion, all we are asking, I guess the best, Mr. Corbyn put it the best, all we are asking is solidarity of everybody else around the globe with the struggle of the working people of Iran, with the general struggle of the people of Iran, to go beyond this theocratic dictatorship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Habib, for that illuminating insight into the situation in Iran, and we're very grateful for your participation here this evening. This now brings us to our Q&A session, and we thank those who have supplied questions via the Q&A section of the chat. We are now, despite all of the technical problems that we had earlier, we are running only 10 minutes behind the schedule. So I thank you. I thank everybody here today, both the speakers on the panel and the attendees for bearing with us for all of this. And I would also like to make sure that any questions that don't get answered here in the remaining time left, we here at Deliberation will make sure that these are answered to your email address. So no concerns there. If your question doesn't feature this evening, it will nevertheless be mentioned following the closing of the meeting. So I'm looking now at the Q&A panel. My first question, or rather a clarification on the point, if possible, is to Professor Abrahamian. And it's regarding the points where you mentioned the regime maintaining support amongst the bazaar. Would you be able to expand upon this, if possible? Because there are some who might think that because of the news that we received elsewhere, that this picture is contradicted. So, would you be able to expand, if possible, on the regime's continuing support amongst the bazaar class? And if you could keep your answer to between 3 to 5 minutes, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Sorry, Professor Abrahamian, you are muted.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, yes, we can. We can hear you. Thank you very much.
That's a very relevant question, and I'll try to answer it in a few minutes. During the 1978-79 revolution, the bazaar was key to it. I would say it was the vanguard of the revolution. You had general strikes throughout the bazaars. And the bazaars not only struck against the Shah, they actually financed and supported other people, especially trade unions, against the regime. In the present crisis, clearly there is, among some sectors of the bazaar, discontent with the regime. But I think what's more important is during the Islamic Republic, there's been already a split in the bazaars. The ones who had been at the forefront of supporting the revolution have got themselves very much integrated into the regime. As Comrade Habib said, this is a capitalist regime, and the main capitalists, of course, in the bazaar have been quite clever in basically attaching themselves to the regime. You could see this in personnel levels. A group of low-level businessmen in the bazaar who created an Islamic group a long time ago, and the first act was assassinating one of the Shah's prime ministers. They were very important during the revolution, and recently they were, in fact, given the petrochemical industry to Iran. And I assure you that running the petrochemical industry is much more prosperous than running a butcher shop or a tailor's shop in the bazaar. So there have been sectors of the bazaar who have actually become part of the regime, intricate part of the regime. There are others who have not succeeded and have been considered themselves cut off. But as far as we can see, there haven't been general strikes in the bazaars. There were some strikes in the Kurdish areas and the Baluchi areas, but when you come to places like Tehran, Isfahan, the core bazaar area, the sectors, they've been pretty passive. That doesn't mean they really actively support the regime, but they are not active against the regime. And to explain that, I think in part because there's ideological affinity between what the regime does and some Bazarist ideology is pretty Islamic, right-wing Islamic concepts they support. So far, I would say the Bazaar has not participated in the uprising. This is also true in the 2009 protests, where you have massive protests against the electoral rigging. The Bazaris didn't come out. They basically observed the protests, but did not support the protests. So I would say a good sign that there is a revolution coming is if the Bazaris actually begin to strike. And so far, I haven't seen that. And until that happens, I think that the regime still has some connections with the Bazar. And here again, I think, as Comrade Habib talks about, it's a capitalist regime. The Bazar is a capitalist enterprise. They may not like some of the things that the regime does, and I think they would prefer much more commercial activities with the West rather than with China or Russia. In fact, the Chinese links undermine the Bazar, so I think they have a vested interest. And I think that's why some of them would support people like Rouhani, Khamenei, rather than the present regime of being not just anti-American, but anti-West and commerce with the West. So I think the Bazar is still crucial, and it was very crucial during the revolution. What happens in future, again, very much depends on the Bazar, as well as, of course, the trade unions and the student movement and the young movement and the women's movement.
Thank you very much, Professor Abrahamian. My next question, I'm going to direct it to Mr. Ozkan, if possible. It relates to Iran's economy. Has Iran's economy been affected by climate change and the move away from fossil fuels towards a greener energy in relation to the information that you have regarding Iran's energy sector and the petrochemicals industry? Is there any benefit? Is there any equivalent of a deal for the Iranian working class who might be otherwise engaged in the harvesting of conventional fossil fuels and in the oil industry?
And I can tell you that the Iranian economy is overwhelmingly dependent on fossil fuels, even though there is certain level of manufacturing. But that manufacturing is quite behind because of sanctions. There has been no opportunity to be able to technologically develop it. There were some possibilities for Iranian economy to couple with the global capital, and particularly some French companies. I can tell you, in the automotive industry, in oil sector, they were trying to bring their expertise and technological development to the economy. But after the decision of sanctions by the United States, they all have pulled back their investments. At this stage, at least as far as I can follow, I don't see any attempt from the Iranian government side to transform the economy, transform the fossil fuels, oil, gas. And I can tell you that in the union movement, particularly in the democratic union movement side, there is no such capacity and ability to be able to really make this an agenda item. There is no such capacity. They are only dealing with their livelihoods, unpaid wages, and very bad working conditions. When you have the basic problems, so imagine the pyramid of Maslow, and everyone needs to meet their fundamental needs. Now, not just in Iran, I can tell you, it is the whole working class in the world, and they need to make first their basic needs: housing, food, heating, and it is not there. It is not there. So this is why, if you raise this question from the point of view of the union movement, I can tell you that the union movement has no such capacity. But at the same time, I don't see such the intention and the work in the side of the government for transforming the economy. I think this global agenda item is not something that exists in the country. In the meantime, if I may, I also want to make some comments about this Bazaar discussion, because it is something important. And now what we see different modeling of economics on the basis of the specificities of the economies in different parts. Indeed, in Iran, this bazaar in ex-Soviet countries like oligarchs, and there is similar situation in Turkey at the moment, a kind of group of entrepreneurs around Erdogan, or Egyptian part just putting and using the army as the main actor in the economy, militarization of the economy for controlling everything. From that point of view, I think Comrade Habib and Professor Abrahamian, they were right that now at the end, there is a political direction, but that political direction is combined with a version of the neoliberal economy. Indeed, when I try to identify how we can define the regime in Iran, indeed, it is theocratic. That means government by religious leaders. But at the same time, we can easily say a theocratic totalitarian regime. And again, this little group of leaders also using this ideology and imposing lifestyle to everyone. And they don't tolerate any deviation from the state ideology, and all the opponents are persecuted, tortured, detained, even in the camps, prison houses, and members of ethnic minorities are killed, are tortured. MP Corbyn, Comrade Corbyn, was very much right. And we really don't know what is going on exactly in Irani Kurdistan. We know what is happening in Iraqi Kurdistan, in Syria, in Turkey. But I think the most repressive regime against Kurds happening in Iran. I think this is not acceptable. Same for the religious choices, and there is no any chance for anyone to declare, to announce the sexual orientation. Like
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry to
okay, that's fine. So this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much,
Comrade Chair.
The next question I will address to Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy has kindly actually provided a tight answer, but I would like to ask him if he could explain to the attendees that the question is, I agree with Jeremy Corbyn on the British trade unions extending solidarity to Iranian workers. As the president of Liberation, what practical activity could be organised by Liberation as well as progressive parliamentarians in Britain to encourage such solidarity? If Jeremy could take 2 or 3 minutes to answer that question, I would be most grateful. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. I just typed a reply to Ararat, actually, but I think that might have disappeared into the ether somewhere. The question is one of understanding what is happening in Iran, and it's always presented to us on the media as almost a sense of powerlessness of the Iranian people, and it's all about what the West can say and the West can do, and the sanctions can be imposed and so on. And I suspect behind all that is interest, let's put it politely, interest in the huge oil reserves that Iran has. And secondly, it's a failure often by our own trade union movement to understand the strength of unions in Iran and the tradition of trade union activity and membership that is there in certain industries, particularly the oil industry, but railways and so on, which is very important to understand. And so that's the first thing, is understanding. The second is practical solidarity. Well, solidarity is best expressed if you carry out the wishes of the people that you're in solidarity with. And so if trade unions in Iran call upon us to mount a boycott campaign or ask our governments to mount some kind of boycott campaign, that's fair enough, and we should do that. Secondly, if there are companies involved in repressing trade unions in Iran that, despite sanctions, have any kind of link with particular companies or organizations in our own country, then we should be taking action with those companies and making demands upon them. And thirdly, practical support for individuals who are threatened with imprisonment or indeed are currently in prison because of trade union activities. We should make those demands to the embassies in our own countries and directly to the Iranian government about individuals. And that's why in Parliament, for example, I have raised the issue a number of times of some trade unionists, and where they have wanted it, named them in Parliament. Where they don't want it, don't name them, saying that when the British government is in negotiation, as it was over Nazanin's release, I've no problem with that. It was right to negotiate for her release. Then we should also be negotiating the release of others, including trade unionists who are in prison. And I think we should express our solidarity in that way. And lastly, if it is of help to unions in Iran, if it is safe for them to do so, to leave Iran and be able to speak in solidarity in our own countries, then we should support them in doing so and make them the guests of our own union so that people can be educated. It is about empowerment of people, not a patronizing power, but empowerment of people in their own locations. Hello?
Thank you very much, Jeremy. That was very good. The next question I would like to direct to Comrade Habib, please. He mentioned the Iranian regime has benefited from sanctions. Could he please, in 2 to 3 minutes, just elaborate a little further on this point, please? Thank you.
Sure. Maybe it's better to say that the people that are affiliated with this regime has benefited from that. They basically these sanctions help them sack the wealth of the country. You know, Iran sells oil. That's one of the biggest income sources of Iran, oil and gas and petrochemicals and everything else. But because of sanctions, there's a lot of rentiering in here, and that's how they benefited from it. And they learned actually ways how to go around the sanctions. And they're actually teaching other people to do that. That's what we hear anyways. We're not inside the establishment to say for sure, but we hear news about, for example, Russians or Syrians are telling that they are learning from Iranians how to go around the sanctions and engage in illegal, let's call it, exchanges over, especially military exchanges all across the globe. But they have amassed huge amounts of money just by doing that, by just using these sanctions to their benefit while, raising the prices. The sanctions, so all the prices are higher. The dollar is high, actually, the value of dollar is high. And in the meantime, the basic living of the people is under threat. For example, during the COVID, first they said no. First they banned actually importing vaccines, which was a criminal act by itself. And then they tried to get vaccines from here and there. And in the meantime, in this process, sanctions are always a good excuse for them to raise the prices and basically empty the pocket of the people. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you very much, Comrade Habib. My next question is to Azar. There are those who say that the women life freedom movement was a feminist revolution. Is this only a women's movement and only about demands pertaining to women? What about the role of workers, youth, and pensioners in Iran? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I understand the intention of the questioner, but I think there are two aspects to this. One is that women have been the target of a very specific kind of repression by this regime. And the woman life freedom movement and protests were addressing that initially and very strongly. The persecution of women, really, and the discrimination against women has been massive over the past 40-something years. But having said that, women are also workers, women are also students, they are also employees in various places. So you can't separate women or being a woman from being a member of the society as well. So they have suffered also as workers. This is the whole thing about the dual exploitation of women that Marxists believe in. And that has happened. So the woman life freedom protests, as well as earlier protests. I mean, this is only one link in a whole chain, in a long chain of protests and activism that women have engaged in since the announcement, effectively, or proclamation that women should wear the hijab in the early years of the revolution, 1979, 1980, during that time. So yes, it should be seen as as specific in terms of women having had enough of being singled out for this particular kind of discrimination and aggression, effectively, but also they are part of the bigger movement. If I may go back to the question that was asked of Comrade Habib about the sanctions and how the regime has benefited, I just remembered one example of Shamkhani, who is the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. His son is said to own around 100 tankers of oil and gas. And his business model is that he buys oil from Iran at 40% the value, market value, and sells it to whatever country buys it, India or wherever. The money doesn't go to the treasury, Iran's treasury. All it does is it fills the pockets of people associated with the ruling regime. Just one example. I hope I have answered the question from the other questioner as well. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Dr. Azar. My next question I would like to direct to Professor Abrahamian and to Comrade Habib, if possible. but if possible, if they could frame their answers within 2 to 3 minutes, a maximum. And the question is relating to the recent détente of sorts between Iran and Saudi Arabia, facilitated by Beijing. What is the impact of the recent mediated normalization? And does it mean that Saudi Arabia and Iran will abandon their proxy wars and conflicts of recent years, particularly in relation to Yemen and Syria? And will the region be more peaceful as a result of this? Thank you. To Professor Abrahamian first, please.
Yes, I mean, it came as a surprise that the two countries that had been in polemics for the last 2 decades, really. In fact, at one time, the Saudis were telling the Americans that Iran was a serpent whose head had to be cut off. They've obviously reversed their position. Iran has also toned down. Before, Iran was talking about all monarchies are illegitimate. And of course, the Saudis are ruled by a monarch. So by that logic, they should be against the Saudi monarchy. I think what both sides are actually, I think, being quite opportunistic, or you could say pragmatic. The Saudis have decided, especially under Trump's administration, that US can't be depended on for protection. And when Iran was able to actually get a missile to do serious damage at their installations, they had second thoughts about relying on United States as protection. Iran is on a different motive. Iran, as being basically decided to cut off its relations with not just with America, but Western Europe, and becoming much more, let's say, Eastern oriented, also wants to have better relations in the neighborhood as a way of relieving pressure. And that leaves it basically a good I think, interest, national interest to try to normalize relations with the Saudis. But whether it means much in the long run, I don't think so, because still the main issues are going to be the nuclear issue, and Saudis don't have a role in that, nor the Chinese. So overall, the international situation is not that different with better, if there are better normalization of relations between the two countries.
Thank you very much, Professor Abrahamian. And over to you, Comrade Habib.
Yes, basically, what Professor Abrahamian said that's what is happening, and I fully concur with that. We welcome, as a leftist, as a progressive party in Iran, we welcome détente in Iran, as put it, in that, because of these negotiations. Anything that can reduce tensions in the region, we welcome that. Even though it is between Iran and Saudi Arabia, even if it is between Iran and Western powers, we are against any kind of tension, escalation of tensions, and worse than that, any type of war, actually military. Mr. Corbyn rightfully mentioned, we are against all of that. But we believe that this might be a fragile thing. This may not stay for a long time. Islamic Republic of Iran, for their own survival, they can do anything. They're willing to do anything just to continue the rule in Iran. It doesn't mean that this is going to have benefits for the people of Iran, but the regime will try, by making these deals, will try to stay in power longer and longer. Now, if this is going to have any meaningful impact and results and useful results for the people of Iran, we very much doubt that, because the main structure of the regime is not built for that purpose. So we think it is a good idea. It was good. We hope that these things happen more often. But we think it is fragile, and it's not going to benefit the people of Iran much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Habib. I would now like to invite each of the speakers in turn to make closing remarks and particularly to frame their remarks. If there were one thing they think each attendee at this evening's meeting, and each of you are on Facebook, as we are also live streaming this event on that platform as well, if there was one thing that each attendee and each viewer could do, having left this meeting, what would it be? And aside from joining Liberation, of course, that goes without saying. So if possible, if each speaker could give their closing remarks for 3 minutes each. Thank you very much. I'll start with Professor Abrahamian.
Yes, first I'd like to thank the organization for convening this panel. Well, I think it's very important issues we really need to discuss. I would like to end basically on the question of how one can support what is going on in Iran from outside. The diaspora has very much been involved in basically airing the grievances in Iran. But the problem is often they've been supporting individuals, individuals who have a great deal of baggage from the past as spokesmen for the Iranian protests. I think as non-government organizations, we should basically support not individuals, but basically the aspirations of the Iranian people, which are liberty and equality. These are the two issues that are facing Iran. It's not just the women's rights or trade union rights, but the notion of liberty, equality, inalienable rights of individuals. And here, the support should come not from governments. Most Western governments have their own actually baggage on these issues. Maybe perhaps North European states can, with honesty, support liberty, equality. But when it comes to major powers such as United States, it becomes hypocritical for the American government to actually talk about women's rights in Iran, where actually women don't have equal rights in the United States. The ERA failed in the United States, people forget. So for the United States to talk about how US is supporting women's rights in Iran becomes laughable. Instead, we as individuals and organizations should support basically the general aspirations, which are basically the ideas of the radical enlightenment, and support anyone in Iran who supports those aspirations. To put it in concrete terms, in the United States, there was a great deal of the demand in the diaspora that the United States should not deal on the nuclear issues, because if the US actually negotiated with Iran on the nuclear issue, this would help the regime and undermine the protest movements, which is actually a non sequitur. It doesn't necessarily mean that the revolution is going to come if United States doesn't negotiate, nor does it mean that if United States actually comes to an agreement with Iran on the nuclear issue, this is going to actually prevent a revolution. What is happening in Iran has its own dynamics, and it's not going to be affected so much by outside. So my basic message would be we as outsiders should be supporting the aspirations of liberty and equality in Iran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Abrahamian. And now to Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. To follow Professor Ervand is an honor and a pleasure, and I think his last remarks are particularly important concerning the nuclear deal. I've been involved with CND and other peace organizations all my life, and I've been to many non-proliferation treaty review conferences and prepcoms, and indeed met the Iranian delegations there, and indeed met in Iran in 2014 many, and it seemed to me the opportunity was then available for a nuclear agreement with Iran, which would be accompanied by a human rights dialogue with the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, which seemed to me to be something worth looking at. I mean, because the idea of an enhancement of growth of nuclear weapons across the region is terrifying and frightening. And that's why the decisions of the NPT at successive conferences for a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East, which would obviously include Iran and Israel, were very, very important steps forward. Likewise, the ceasefire, and I hope it lasts, in Yemen is a good step forward, but that's got to be accompanied by an awful lot of support and aid into Yemen to deal with the catastrophe of poverty, hunger, wholly preventable illnesses, and so on there. So involvement of other countries through the UN, I think, is valuable and important, but I do not think that outside influences, particularly highly armed military powers, can bring about the social change in Iran. The social change in Iran can only come from people in Iran rising up and making the demands. That is how the Mossadegh government got into power. That's why there was a coup against it, because of nationalization of oil resources and the assertion of economic independence by Iran by that government. And it's also the repression of the Shah, which led to the revolution in 1979. Now, we're obviously very well aware of the what happened after that, and also the current period of repression. So I do think the understanding the history of Iran is very, very important to get some idea of why the current situation is what it is. And I repeat my points that I made at the beginning, and also I picked up from this meeting tonight. It is about practical levels of solidarity with groups of people in Iran, working class organizations, trade unions, women's organizations as a whole, ethnic groups, linguistic groups, minority groups as a whole, because it's very tempting to always look for the heroic individual and support them. Of course, if somebody is threatened with the death penalty, or it happened individuals, then of course you express solidarity, but it is about the collective we've got to express that solidarity with. And that's why I think the voice of trade unions tonight has been particularly important. I have worked with many people in the Iranian diaspora over many years, and indeed there are many from the Iranian diaspora who live in my constituency. I've never forgotten in the when would it be? Probably mid-80s or so, going to one family, knowing that they had one member of their family in prison, likely to be executed. So we discussed the issue as best we could, and it was a very difficult conversation. And at the end of it, I said, well, is there anything you'd like me to do? Is it worth my while trying to raise it in Parliament? Is it worth my while writing to the government of Iran, the embassy, whatever else? This was mid-80s, remember, at the height of a very terrible period. And they said, no, there's absolutely nothing you can do. Because if you so much as raise the name of an individual, all it will do is hasten their execution. That was the horrors of the isolation of some in the diaspora. So I think we have to support the diaspora and be guided by movements in Iran and the views of people as the solidarity that we can offer. Trade union solidarity, community solidarity, working class solidarity, surely the right way forward. Countries didn't achieve the end of colonial occupation, which is why liberation was founded in the 1950s, by necessarily by outside feelings. They achieved it by their own actions and their own bravery, with the solidarity and support from people outside. It's that solidarity and support I'm looking for, and that can be done first by informing people.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. And now to Dr. Azar Sepehr, please, for her closing remarks. Please, within 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I too would like to thank Liberation for having organized this, and it has been a pleasure to be on platform with such renowned scholars and activists. My point would be the thing to take forward or to do tomorrow, as you were asking, is mobilizing for an end to child marriage, mobilizing to end the compulsory hijab in Iran, and an end to executions. And the discrimination that women suffer in Iran, the exploitation, in a way, the commodification of a life, a human life, must end. But this is part and parcel of the capitalist system. And in one way or another, we see other manifestations of such discrimination and exploitation elsewhere too in the world. And I hope that by mobilizing in order to end these practices, we can stop the practice of it, cause a chain reaction to stop the practice of it elsewhere, in the region and elsewhere. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azar. I now ask for the closing remarks of Mr. Kemal Ozkan. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Let me also join the other participants in thanking the Liberation for organizing this important exchange. As the working class, together with our civil society allies, progressive forces, we have determination, we have motivation, we have energy, we have values, we have conviction to create a new society. And another word, another Iran is possible, is necessary. And this is why I believe that change in Iran will come, is coming. And that change will come from within, with the working class, together with the citizens fighting for and winning their rights. And I can tell you that the Iranian working class, all the independent democratic unions, they have a position at the forefront of the current struggles, not only for workers' rights, but also for an end to the dictatorship, for human rights, for democratic rights, and for social justice. Thanks to their principled and unwavering struggles during some of the darkest chapters of the history of the Islamic Republic, in the union's working class, all the activists enjoy huge support among the general population, and they are afforded a lot of respect. And I can tell you that the regime is aware of this, and the labor activists remain the largest of the contingents amongst Iran's significant population of political prisoners, with several activists having already served long or repeated sentences of imprisonment. So this is why, as the international union movement, our role is to support these courageous people in their fight, in their struggle, with the notion of solidarity, and to be at hand to offer them solidarity, technical assistance, in strengthening civil society, trade union structure, and we will certainly continue to keep the worldwide attention to what is happening in Iran, violations of fundamental rights, repression against civil society through international campaigns and mobilizations. And then we will certainly continue to have a strong engagement to increase the pressure over the regime. I think this is a historical responsibility as far as the working class is concerned, and doing it in Iran, doing it elsewhere in the world, where when we have increasing attacks against democracy, democratic institutions, democratic rules, and this is our universal mission. And I'm sure we will win by standing up, by speaking up, and by fighting back. And this needs to be the root direction of the working class union movement and also the political movement around the world. Thank you very much again, Comrade Chair, all the participants.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ozkan. And last but not least, to Comrade Habib. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's very inspiring to hear what everybody else has to say. Really, really inspiring. Thank you all, especially when talking about non-interference of the foreign powers in Iran. We, in a working class movement, we should use our internationalism. The capitalists, the other side of the equation, they have their own international system, and it works really well. So we have to use our power of internationalism. In this case, in Iran, I know that we all have our own issues, in different countries that we live in, or in different organizations that we work with. But anyways, in this case, in Iran, as I mentioned, this is a fusion of religion and a state, something that was abandoned hundreds of years ago in Europe. Still, there are some aspects of it that still lives out there today, but basically this was removed, separated religion from state. In Iran, this is one of the main targets. So the main target, the main obstacle in Iran is just to remove this theocratic dictatorship. Now, we think that before this is removed, there's little that can be done. Not much can be done. Maybe small reforms here and there. That's why going back to the non-interference and leaving everything to the hands of the people, our party has suggested a national broad front of anti-dictatorship political parties and progressive forces in Iran. We've been struggling, striving to get this front formed. We have had some successes, but mainly hasn't materialized yet. But that's what we have been working towards. And on our side, anyways, obviously, everybody else around the globe, they have their own agendas, or you have your own means and possible ways to help, as everybody mentioned, to support and express solidarity with the struggle of the people of Iran. We can push the government and respect the right of the people in different aspects for working people, labor, organization, women's rights, youth rights, freedom of expression and everything. Release the political prisoners, stop the executions. These are all the things that can be done in different aspects, not begging the powers, not begging the governments, but using our own working class, working people internationalism. We have our own, as Kemal properly said, we have our own institutions which we should be using those. Our plan basically for that democratic front that I mentioned, anti-dictatorship front that I mentioned to reform in Iran, is first of all to remove this dictatorship and establish a secular national democratic government in Iran. Is trying to stop neoliberal, the most barbaric versions of capitalism in Iran. Iran is not in the socialism revolution stage at this point. So it's mainly a general anti-dictatorship revolution. So we are trying towards that and to maintain peace and sovereignty for Iran Thanks again for everybody. Thanks Liberation for that. Just want to make one announcement in the spirit of what we've been talking in the last segment, that there is a May 20th demonstration across the globe. The cities will be announced later. This is to stop executions in Iran this coming Saturday in the cities in Europe and North America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Habib, and thank you indeed to all of the speakers this evening. We are very grateful for your patience and for bearing with us during what has been an evening which has been fraught with technical mishaps from the outset. So we are very glad that you stayed with us, and thank you to all of the attendees as well at this evening's important and timely meeting with Iran at its current juncture. I would like to also thank Christine Blower, to send a special mention to Christine Blower, who was originally due to chair this evening's event, but due to an unforeseen glitch right at the last minute, in fact, just as the meeting was underway, meant that we had to switch chairs to yours truly. And this was my first time, so I'm very glad that everybody has been patient and very kind to me throughout. Thank you for all of the important contributions and for drawing attention to the solidarity movement with the Iranians. It's a very important movement, and definitely, as someone of Iranian background myself, that Iranian people definitely feel a sense of isolation at the moment, and are looking to, as well, to see what measures, what actions are being taken by their counterparts outside to join them in a principled solidarity with their movement against the dictatorship, which is unfortunately now over 40 years old. We hope that you keep in touch with Liberation. I would direct all of you to the Liberation's website, which is www.liberationorg.co.uk, and you can also follow us on Twitter at LiberationOrgUK, all one word, and you keep up to date there. Also keep up to date with our affiliate, the Committee for the Defence of Iranian People's Rights, a solidarity organisation with the Iranian people, which is steadily building its online activity, having been based and campaigning in Britain since 1981. The website is www.codir.net, and they're also on Twitter at CODIRinfo, all one word. So thank you very much to everyone. We endeavour here at Liberation to make sure that those questions which weren't answered this evening will be put to the panelists, and hopefully we will get some answers which we can then email to all of you via the information that was submitted when you registered. But thank you very much to all for your attendance, and I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.